Hello, everybody. Welcome back to High Ground. My name is Tanner, and today a little bit of a podcast style video. I haven't done one of these in super recently, and I'm here with. Do you go by Purple? Is that just the name of your channel? What do you actually go by?
I go by Purple. That's what most people call me. Yeah.
Okay, so I got Purple here, and he makes Siege videos, interview style videos, but also other stuff. And I've watched a handful of your videos, but I haven't really dipped my toes into the non-Siege stuff. So maybe tell us about, I guess the Siege stuff, but also what you do beyond the Siege stuff.
Yeah, so the channel actually it's always been a video essay style on generally games that I really enjoy. I like putting a positive spin on games, especially ones that maybe not everyone loved. I'm a big Mass Effect 3 fan, which is going to upset a lot of people. But I kind of lucked into the Siege interview thing. I'm not sure how much we want to get into like the history of it, but TLDR, I was working on a video about Siege in general, kind of how it was going downhill a little bit, and I wasn't really happy with the game. And I reached out to a bunch of people because I wanted different perspectives on the game, right? I wanted the casual community, I wanted the pro community, I wanted content creators. So I just DM'd a ton of people. And the one person who DM'd me back was Fabian. And this was before Invite 2024. And so he says, obviously, he says yes, but it'll have to be after Invite. So, of course, I say, yes, of course, I'll wait for Fabian. And then we get scheduled after Invite 2024. We're scheduled on a Thursday. Wednesday morning, they do the PSG Talon press release. So, obviously, I have to write an entire new script overnight.
Yeah, that's
do the Fabian video. Do the video with Talon, which is now blown up. It's the second biggest video on my channel. And I took the opportunity to talk to other Siege people. I just kept reaching out, and people kept saying yes, and here we are. I like telling people stories.
Yeah, and I think you do a really good job. I mean, you're on. Did you hit 2,000 subs yet?
No, 1150 right now.
Yeah, getting there. Well, not that I'm some big channel to be able to speak about it, but it's definitely like ebbs and flows. Like I got a lot of traction during the recent major, and I think a big part of a big reason for that was that Ubisoft was having the like prediction contest or whatever, and I didn't even realize that was a thing, and so I just got a little bit lucky. I made a video titled like major predictions or whatever, and a bunch of people watched it because they wanted to get a free battle pass. But yeah, sometimes you just sort of luck into things, and I imagine your stuff will continue to grow if you continue to put out stuff of such quality. Although, to be fair, you do with the other stuff, but the Siege stuff is like, I don't know, it can be tough making competitive Siege content. I think Siege is like pretty big right now in the casual side with Jinxie and whatnot, but it can definitely be tough on the comp side of things, in my experience at least.
Yeah, no, the comp side is tough right now because like we see obviously huge tournaments for a couple of weeks, and then we kind of, the massive breaks in between, and then we talked about it a little bit before this, but it's kind of hard to follow some of the scenes. They're maybe not streamed, they're not promoted very well, and
yeah,
it does become a bit of a problem. Yeah,
it really doesn't help the fact that with the new change that they made, it used to be 3 majors in SI, and now I guess if you count Gamers 8 or Esports World Cup now, that's sort of a major, but they cut down the one official major. Probably Esports World Cup would be happening regardless, so we could have 5 big events in the year. But it's just such a massive off season between first major, second major. There's just like 3 months of absolute, again, not nothing because there is non-official stuff, but as far as the official stuff, just a complete drought. And I imagine there's a lot of people that only want to follow actual, official pro stuff. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the upcoming quals. I guess we're sort of in the midst of it already because they've already run the open quals for at least Europe and Brazil. I think this week is North America, and then I'm not actually 100% sure when the closed quals start. And I think the closed quals are actually streamed, although don't quote me on that. The open quals weren't, beyond people streaming their own POV. Like I was watching Hungry play against BDS, which was kind of cool. And it's a little bit different of an experience. I don't know if you've ever watched anyone just like stream their POV, but he didn't have his mic on in the stream, so it's just the raw gameplay, no commentators, no layout. No HUD. Yeah. It's just the raw gameplay. So it's like you're playing the game in a way. It's kind of cool. I hadn't watched that way in a long time, and it was sort of nice to watch that way. But anyways,
it definitely kind of throws you back, right?
Yeah, for sure. I used to play the game a ton, like a lot. The first year of the game, I I don't even know how many hundreds and hundreds of hours I probably put in, but I don't play too much these days. Every once in a while, but for a variety of reasons, I don't so much. But okay, I think what we'll talk about in a little bit, I definitely want to go over some roster changes because I think that's really exciting right now. And maybe we'll speculate on where teams might go with some of the changes. Do you tend to be more familiar with North America, or do you not have like any sort of regional bias as far as your knowledge?
I definitely follow North America closer just because I'm a fan of NA teams.
Of course.
And obviously the time zones work out better for me to watch stuff.
Okay,
But
yeah,
I try to be aware of other regions. Doesn't always
maybe we'll talk about the other ones a little bit, but I definitely focus on North America the most because, yeah, time zones and just, it just makes sense to be a fan of your own region. So, but before that, I'm really interested in hearing a little bit about your process and maybe for selfish reasons because I can maybe steal a few tips and whatnot. But I don't know, maybe it's a really lengthy process, but like I guess high level stuff. What does your video making process look like? Like what do you do sort of step by step? Maybe it doesn't have to be super granular, but what do you do and what sort of resources do you use?
So I can actually take you
Sure.
one end to the other. It's not a very complicated process for me. Because I've had a lot of people ask me on like Reddit and stuff, like, how do you get these interviews and stuff, right? People are always curious. I DM people. It's not that hard. Be polite. Don't spam them. Be upfront. Once I get a confirmation on somebody, the real work starts as I will go through their entire Wikipedia. I will go through any old interviews I can find, any media I can find about them to prepare my interview questions, right? Because my whole goal is to tell someone the story of their career. And so my whole goal is to know as much as possible about it before we start talking. I want to be able to ask them the right questions and allow them to talk about themselves.
So
that's the biggest thing for me.
Do you come up with a little bit of a narrative before you reach out though, or do you just start, putting stuff out there and then as soon as you hear something back, you then start? Like, do you do anything beforehand, or is it everything after the confirmation?
Not directly, but I specifically reach out to people who I think already have an interesting story, something that I can tie myself to, a story I can see, maybe other, like Rexon being deaf in one ear, right? I found out a lot of people just don't know that's a fact. And so I thought, that's a thing a lot of people should be interested in. Things like that. Yeah.
And then there's also stuff like, it's easy to talk to a guy like Gunner, major MVP. That story sort of writes itself. But exactly. then on the other end, yeah, there's a little bit more obscure stuff like the Rexon story. So yeah, you reach out, and I've done that a little bit in the past as well. I haven't done a ton of interviews. I did one with Penguin quite a while back, and then I did a few like Jeopardy videos I had a few pros and commentators, whatever. And yeah, I reached out. Do you always just use Twitter, or do you reach out through different means?
Just Twitter right now. It's had pretty good luck for me. Basically, obviously I can't reach out. There's some people who are locked behind like Twitter Blue, so I just, I give up on that. Yeah. Once I kind of give up on Twitter, I'll probably start moving to like Discord or other means, maybe find emails. But for now, it's just Twitter.
Yeah, I feel like, I don't know if this is the case for other games, but for Siege, like it is really centered around Twitter as far as the social media aspect of the game goes.
Yeah, so then once I have a confirmation, I write up an entire script. They're usually somewhere between 5 and 8 pages, although I use very big font because I'm blind. And then obviously I get in a call with somebody. I kind of lay down the ground rules, like, hey, this isn't a podcast. If you need to, say something again, say it again. If you need me to cut something out later, I'll cut it out later. I've only ever had to do that once, but it wasn't a big deal. And so obviously do the interview with the person, and then I'll go back. And then the process is really pretty simple. I'll rewatch or re-listen to my interview, I suppose. And then I'll write a new script for the video. So I'll write myself an intro, and then I go through all the individual questions. And so you've watched my videos, right? So I kind of do a lead in and then an answer, and that's how I do it. I listen to the answer and then I write the question essentially.
That makes a lot of sense. Honestly, listening to it, I didn't imagine it that way. I don't think that's like necessarily the most intuitive seeming way, but now that you describe it, that makes a ton of sense. It's got to be a lot easier to apply things. Like I sort of thought you came up with the ideas and then you cut up the interview to sort of slot in, but to do it the other way, yeah, it seems to make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it works out really well. And like I said, my biggest thing is I like storytelling. So I find a thread and I kind of try to tell a story throughout it. And I base the interview around that, and it usually works out pretty well. Sometimes I lose stuff. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes people don't want to talk about things I'm interested in, but that happens. And then it's really pretty simple. I use a software called HitPaw to download a lot of footage from YouTube. Basically anything I talk about, I try to find footage of it, which is easier with new stuff like majors and pro league. Old invite quals from 2018 I can't find right now, so that's tough. But I will rip stuff from people's YouTube channels on occasion to like fill in the gaps of their very, very early career, because sometimes they'll post their own like qual footage and things that aren't posted publicly. And then it really just all comes together. I have my new voiceover that I plug in, I cut together the interview, I put whatever footage I can find behind it, and that's really all it is.
Yeah, I do it. I should use a downloading program. I do it the really ghetto way, because I usually don't have to get a ton of footage, but I just straight up OBS screen record a YouTube video of like a match or whatever. I know there's easier ways to do it, but I think it's well enough if I'm only recording like 30 seconds at a time or whatever, because I'd have to go in and cut something. It makes me. I know it makes me sound like a caveman. I'm just
no, that's how I did it for a really long time.
I know there's better ways to do it, but and if ever I need like an absolute ton of videos, I'll find a better way to do it. But yeah, it's good to know that the real professionals do it in a more professional way. So,
I mean, the whole thing for me is that like I'm looking at my super folder right now. For that video, I downloaded 110 gigabytes worth of footage. I just couldn't do it with any other way.
Yeah. No, that would be an insane time investment for sure, when there's just a much easier method. So what do you use as far as software?
For the most part,
you talked about this, but
I'm in the Adobe Creative Cloud. I don't recommend it for people, especially with the recent issues on Adobe, but it's kind of the monster I know at this point. I use Premiere for my video, I use Audition for my audio, I use Photoshop for my photos, I guess. Yeah. For anyone listening that wants to be a creator, DaVinci Resolve for video, Audacity for audio. There's plenty of free stuff out there to do thumbnails with Photoshop. Don't buy into Adobe.
Yeah, I've never been a fan of the Adobe scheme. I use Audacity. I don't actually do raw audio a lot, so I don't always boot up the Audacity, but I'll use it sometimes. I use OBS, obviously. Do you use OBS, I assume, for the actual recording?
So I'm extremely paranoid, so I use OBS and Shadowplay at the same time, which has saved me on occasion, because I've had times where my OBS died, and I've had times where my Shadowplay's died.
What file format do you record on OBS to? Do you record to their, what is it, MKV or whatever, or do you just do it straight to MP4?
Straight to MP4.
Because I don't know if there's some other reason you do it to MP4, but MKV is like, if you have a lot less issues. Like if anything happens while recording, MP4 is just ruined, whereas MKV is more or less fine. You can even set it to like auto remux, but I don't know if there's some other reason you do it straight to MP4 that I'm not aware
of. No, just lack of knowledge. I'm going to try out MKV now. There you go.
Yeah, or again, I'm not like an expert, but I that's my understanding, is that it's just a lot more reliable. And then it's really easy to just remux within the program to MP4. And then I use DaVinci Resolve. I never learned how to use the Adobe stuff. I do use what is it? I think the name change is called like Creative Cloud or something for thumbnails. I kind of want to change, because a week or two ago I went on there and like the last 2 years of my thumbnails are just gone, which is like fine because I have them all downloaded. But usually to make a new one, I just copy an old one and paste it, because if you make a new one, there's like a watermark or something you have to do. I don't know, there's some nonsense. But if I just make a copy, it's more Adobe nonsense. But and also I have my little high ground logo on there, but I use that. But now I might switch over to something else, because I don't know why it just erased all that stuff for no reason. And then I guess while we're on the trail, what do you use as far as hardware? Like what kind of microphone do you have? I guess is probably the biggest. It's got to be the biggest thing, right?
So I went super basic and expensive, SM7B routed through a Go XLR.
Yeah, I have a Rode Pod mic, which is like 1/4 the price. I think it does pretty well though, and I have a Audient Evo 4 is my audio interface, which I think is also well enough. Is the Go XLR, does it have all the like buttons and stuff? Is that the one?
Yeah.
The knobs and this one, yeah, this one, it's just like one. It's a lot more basic than that, but I think I just manage things a little bit more through software than hardware. But anyways, I was just curious. Yeah, and yeah, that's got to be like the most common answer. Like everybody loves the SM7B. Obviously, it's a fantastic mic.
Well, and I have to say, it's really, for most people, it's not necessary.
No.
I went to it mostly because I live in, I guess it's considered a guest house. I don't know, but my air conditioning is over the top of my head. So it's very, very loud in here for recording audio, and that's most of the reason I went to such a quiet mic. It really doesn't pick up a lot of background audio.
Yeah, and
it's the only reason you can't hear it in the background right now.
And it's the different, I guess, dynamic microphone versus like
Yep.
What are the other? I'm blanking. What are they
Condenser.
called? Condenser. Yeah. Which I mean, like streamers love to use it because you don't have to be right up on the mic. I guess mine's also a dynamic microphone, and it blocks background noise. Not that I have an absolute ton, but it's nice to know that it won't pick up very much of it at all. I feel like the SM7B is almost so ubiquitous that a lot of people like assume you do need that, that it is almost like a requirement. That there aren't just entry level alternatives that'll do you almost just as well. Maybe that's just me.
No, I've had friends who they don't stream, they don't make content. They're like, oh, I want that mic you have. Don't spend $1,000 on a microphone. Don't do that.
Is it 1,000? I thought those were like 400.
Well, by the time you do the interface, and then
sure.
your cables, and what I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a nice arm, or do you have like a basic arm?
My arm is wall mounted.
Oh, nice.
No, it doesn't come in the
I just have a really basic desk mounted one. It was like $20 on Amazon. And when I went, I had one of these before, and when I went to the Charlotte major, I took it with me, and I made a video or something in the hotel, and I left part of it, and so I had to buy a new one. But it was only $20 to replace, so good enough. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's all as far as, I don't know. I just sort of thought we'd have maybe a little bit more to talk about as far as this sort of stuff. But I mean, maybe we'll just move on, unless there's anything else of interest you wanna talk about or get off your chest or whatever, make it known to the world.
No, not particularly. I've been doing the long form essays for so long that I refined my process way before I did Siege stuff. Because I do 2, 3, 4 hour videos, so that's how I got you spend that long making audio and production and all that, you just kind of figure it out along the way. You don't really have a choice.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty dialed in now. I got my custom keyboard, I got my speakers, I got my mic. I'm happy.
Nice. I guess before we move on, do you have any just little tips and tricks kind of things, or just interesting things you learned along the way? And this is maybe putting you on the spot a little bit. These are sort of things that are hard to remember once you've integrated them, but anything come to mind?
Yeah, actually, I have a custom macro pad that I built that sits under my desk. It wasn't very expensive, and you can get them through a company called, I think it's PIKTEA, something like that. They'll build you custom ones, and I absolutely adore it. I have 2 rotary encoders, which are essentially a knob, and then I have 5 macro buttons on it. And that is an absolute blessing for doing stuff either in editing or streaming. It's basically, think of it like a Stream Deck, but it's not $300.
Yeah, I have a Stream Deck, one of the smaller ones, and they are a little bit expensive. I don't remember what it was. I think I got it on sale. It was maybe around 100, but honestly, I don't use it that much. I use it to launch DaVinci Resolve. I have the button right in the middle, and then I don't use it for very much else. I should integrate it a little bit more. It doesn't have any knobs or whatever to work with, which I guess would also be good. But I don't spend a ton of time in Resolve because, I mean, as the viewers probably well know, I don't edit my videos an absolute ton. But before I could usually get away with just doing it in live Windows Live Movie Maker or whatever, because I literally just had video and then I would cut off part of the beginning, part of the end or something. It's just really, really basic editing. But I always go to Resolve anymore because I have the intro, and I actually just made an outro, which I think is actually kind of cool. And anyways, it's I got my little intro, my outro, I put music over it, and maybe I cut out a part here or there if I really, really ramble hard. I do want to do a little bit more long form, more edited stuff, but I think I've architected my audience in such a way that they don't care about that as much. And maybe I shouldn't care about that so much. Maybe I should just make things that I like. But when I just make a video where I talk for 10 minutes about like roster transfers, it does so much better than when I make a, you know, slightly more refined video. As is the way of YouTube.
When your content's good, right? It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, I'll watch your stuff and it's genuinely informative, and that's what I really care about. There's a lot of people, I'm sure, like me. Like, when you put out the video explaining how the prediction system worked, that was actually a godsend.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
you know, when you put out genuinely useful information like you do, I don't think it really matters what you put on the screen, right? It's essentially just not having to listen to it, or not have to read an article, right? Which makes it even better.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I guess it's a little bit hard from the outside looking in, because I've been doing this for like quite a while now. Maybe I've grown pretty slowly, and maybe I've gotten a little bit bigger here recently, but I'm only on what, like 4,000 subs or something. But I've been, when did I start? Maybe like almost 3 years ago, right around 3 years ago. I don't know. I guess I've been doing this for a long time. To some people's minds, but anyways, I guess we're good on this topic. Maybe if anything else comes to your mind later, we can feel free to bring it up. But let's talk some Siege. I guess that's maybe what we're the most here to do, with my curiosity satisfied. So, as you told me before we started recording, you're not super up to date on all of the roster transfers. So I think this will be cool to get your fresh opinions on some of these changes. So. Dream being okay, well, we get started here. Right, end of May. Are you aware of these things? Dream being dropped, Pack Bowl being dropped, Joe Gore, I guess, being dropped.
Didn't know about Joe Gore. I do follow Dream a lot. He's one of my favorite people in the space, so I was a little upset about that one. I don't know where he's gonna find a home, if I'm honest.
So he's playing with it's Foxay, Benji Mula, Dexter, and Hyper, and they qualified for Element 3. So they played through the quals, and now they're in, I don't know how they're calling it, like, regarding phases, but they're in the Swiss phase, and then I think there's the final phase if they make it, but it's like 16 teams in Swiss. It's basically like the major Swiss. I think it's like basically the exact same format, and then top 8 advance.
Yeah, but he's openly talked about that's not a long term.
Yeah, it's not a real team, but my understanding of it is he's using it at least as a platform to prove himself, you know, that he still got it or whatever. And I think same thing with Benji Mula. I heard that he's also doing it with maybe not the express purpose, but at least partially to sort of get his name out there a little bit more, that he'd like to return to Pro Siege. And then as for the other guys, I don't know, Dexter and Dream or Dexter and Foxay and Hyper, maybe they're just doing it for fun. But that's a scary team. I mean, those are all ex-T1 players, and some of them for a really, really long time. Pack Bowl being dropped from Wild. I found that one to be maybe not super surprising. Wild was pretty bad, but I don't know. I think Pack Bowl is always pretty reasonable. I think they're restructuring pretty heavily over there at Wild.
Yeah, because they also dropped Kance over Ketty, I believe, and maybe somebody else. Was it only the two of them, or was it more?
The team, let's just go look at this. The team's like very different now, and I don't know if this is like finalized. Will it even say it here? The team that they're playing, that they played quals with, they were the only T1 team from Europe to not make it into the Esports World Cup close qualifier, and that was going to happen to somebody because there's 9 EUL teams, but only 8 can make it. But literally all 8 teams that made it were EUL teams. They were the one to not make it. I don't know if it has the team here, but Teb is still on there, Lalo's still on there, and it was like, gosh, I don't even remember. It's okay. Well, I was hoping it would tell me here. Made me look foolish. If you go to the Esports World Cup page, is there. But anyways, it's. I want to say like another 1 or 2 Italian players, and then like an Irish player. I was really banking on it telling me the names because I could not remember. Anyways, questionable team, I guess, based on their performance, but I don't know if that's actually the team they're going to be landing on come EUL stage 2. So we'll move on.
I just don't know who you build that team around, to be honest.
I don't know either, because they had that really promising stage last year. And that was, well, I don't know. Do you know about the whole Aces debacle?
Aces, yeah.
I always thought that guy was really good, but I mean, you know, maybe there's a reason for that we're now aware of. But I think it's still unclear. Like, I don't know. Did he cheat? Did he not cheat? Did he only, make it so they could not prove that he didn't cheat? I don't know. I don't know what the deal is. I don't want to speculate too heavily because it's not something I have real knowledge of. Not many people do. So moving on, where else do we have? I guess CD being released from ITV. He was their analyst. We have Kanto being dropped from Wild. Yeah, what do you think about Kanto going forward? Do you think he's gonna land on another team, or do you think it's about wraps for Kanto?
I just think it's about EU as a region right now hasn't looked the strongest, if we're honest. Like, I don't know. They show up at international events, but I mean, what's the last team you really saw out of EU in the last, 2 majors that you really thought could win, right?
Before this one, where BDS was in the final?
I mean, I'm out apart from BDS. Besides the team that was in the final, right? But
yeah. Well, I mean, Secret looked really
ITV,
promising through
Secret.
Swiss. They're really strong, and then they lost to BDS, so it's not like they fell to another region. They lost to their own region. So I don't know. We'll see. But I mean, I get what you're saying. Like G2 had struggles. Virtus Pro, they were good at invite, but then they didn't even make the next major. Like they've been inconsistent, and I don't know. Like they certainly got catching up to do in regards to catching Brazil, who have been on top, and now even North America won another major. So
maybe what I want to say is the lack of depth in EU. He might find a home. Because I just don't see, there's plenty of teams in EU that just aren't competitive right now, so he might find himself on something.
Are there that many teams that aren't competitive? Because
I don't follow it that closely, but I just feel like I don't see a bunch of teams that are nasty, right?
Because like BDS really good.
ITV.
G2, well, I mean, they were really good, and then they had a bad showing at the major, and now they really changed their roster. We'll see what they do going forward. I assume G2 will at least be competitive, at the very least. But
yeah, they just blew that up. They'll figure it out.
Maybe a bold assumption. Secret, pretty solid. They had a good performance in the last major, and then they have a roster change that we'll get to in a little bit. ITB, they looked pretty good in Europe, and then I think they fell short a little bit at the major, going like 1-3 in Swiss. They were a bit of a letdown for me.
They didn't do much for me at the major. Yeah, they didn't look fantastic.
They are all pretty fresh players. Kendra really experienced, but the rest of them, I think that was all of their first international event. So maybe if they qualify for the next one, maybe they'll be a team to look out for now that they have one under their belt. Virtus Pro, I think definitely a team to watch out for, even if they didn't make the last major. They made the 3 events before that, doing really well at Invite, and they actually just beat BDS in the qualifiers. So they advanced through like the quote unquote upper bracket. Like they didn't take a loss. They beat BDS, and BDS still did advance, but they, took a loss to Virtus Pro before they actually made it through. So that's notable. They got 2-0'd, and
I just don't know how much stock I put in Virtus Pro in the current meta. I just think they seem to struggle with it against, a lot of the high level teams.
I mean, you say that
feels a little fast for them.
Even despite, like, are you saying it's sped up even more since Invite, or are you including Invite in that? Because they got 3rd place at Invite. I mean, that's huge.
I mean, I'm looking at BDS, who ran around, or not BDS, Beast Coast, who just, ran the gauntlet it made. I don't know. I love Joystick. I love that team. I just don't see them. I think they're only going to get worse. I don't think they're going to get better.
Oh, really?
What I want to say.
And I don't want to say you're necessarily wrong, but I do want to say that so many people have said that so many times. Like, as far as they must have the most longevity of any team in the game. Like, they've got to, right? They were a top team in like 2019, and then they were top 3 at SI 20. They've been around for so insanely long, and the meta has changed so many times, and they still seem to play more or less the same. Obviously they've adapted to an extent. You couldn't survive otherwise, but I feel like they've been counted out so many times because of the meta, and they've just seemingly always come back. They were literally not even in T1 for like a whole year or whatever it was, and then they just came back and started doing their thing again. Like, I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm just saying they've been doubted before.
No, you're absolutely right. I guess I've lost faith in them, is what I would say, right? I don't have the... You're absolutely right. They've always come back. They've always looked good when they show up to the main stage, right? But no, I don't see that spark in them anymore.
They're one to watch for sure. I almost wonder if they'll make a roster change at some point. I feel like it's especially tough. They're one of the top teams in Europe that doesn't speak English. Because I get BDS switched to English, and besides them, is it only... No, I guess ENCE. Well, I don't know. ENCE just made some roster changes that I don't I think they also picked up French players. So I think it's two French-speaking teams. These guys speak Russian, and I think every other team is English-speaking.
Right.
Which is just like, which just goes to say it's tougher to pick up players. Obviously, when you're calming not in English, you can only pick up players that speak Russian, which is just a however big subsect of the European population. And yeah, so let's go back to the roster changes. I think they're one to look out for, but I sort of share your sentiment. I don't see too much reason to have the utmost faith in them, but I don't know. I want to believe in them because they've always been one of my favorite European teams. They're probably my favorite European team, and probably just one of my favorite teams in general.
It's definitely a case for me of like team that compete versus team that can win, right?
Yeah, fair enough. But what's the video going to be like if they win, though?
Oh, I mean, it'll be fantastic. I mean, here's the thing, right? I hate exactly one team in the entire world, so there's so many people that I'd love to see win. I'm never rooting against anybody with the exception of Dark Zero. So
Dark Zero?
I'm the biggest Dark Zero hater in the world. No one comes close.
How come?
I'm still mad about the hot and cold situation, and I know it's been like 5 years, but I am a hot and cold fan, and I will be mad about how they treated him for the rest of my life. Love the players, no beef with the players, but I hope Dark Zero as an org is everything.
Well, I mean, maybe I'm not remembering it well. Did they do something badly beyond dropping him? Like,
so his story when they dropped him, because I watched he went on a podcast and talked about it, is basically there was an internal email that went out that they players weren't supposed to see. He saw that he had been graded like D or F by BC, something like that, and so he went to him and said like what do I need to do to improve, blah blah blah. And he looked at him and said, Houghton, you don't have anything to worry about. You're on this team, no worries. We'll get you through this, whatever. Cool. And then he found out he was dropped within like a day of the transfer window, and that's how he ends up on Mirage. And I'm still mad about it.
Yeah, that's
I don't like that. Now, obviously, that's what he says, that they say that didn't happen, but I'm picking sides on that one.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's especially tough if it's some he said, she said. I think just if you pretend that didn't happen or whatever, outside looking in, he got replaced by NJR, who is like one of the best players in the world now. I think in a way it's worked out. And I guess it also worked out for Hot and Cold. He's now a major champion. I guess so is NJR. He won Charlotte Major. So maybe it worked out for both of them.
Don't get me wrong. I'm taking NJR for Hot any day of the week. NJR is the best player in NA, arguably, besides Gunner and Beast Coast right now. But I mean, like longevity-wise, NJR has been insanely good since he stepped on the scene.
Yeah, maybe we can talk about top players in a little bit. That's always a fun one. Yeah, and Hot and Cold's he's definitely one of my favorite players because on Dark Zero it was sort of whatever. I never took too much notice of him. I've been an SSG fan for a really really long time, and Dark Zero was one of their foes or whatever way back when. But then he played on SSG for a really long time, and he was so insanely good when he joined. Not internationally, unfortunately, but within the region, like that. Those are just I still can't even believe he did those numbers to this day. Just insane stuff. Huge Hot and Cold fan though. So here we have some of the Talon stuff that you were talking about before. JLT dropped, and he actually goes over to Damwon. We'll see that in a minute. But Yas picked up by Talon, and is the other pickup somewhere close? It's Rheumatic. It's
weeks.
Yeah. We'll get to it eventually, but just so that we can talk about it at the same time. So you have a little bit of a vested interest in Talon having told their story. How do you feel about their drops and their replacements, Yas and Rheumatic coming in?
I mean, I don't know a lot about Rheumatic. Obviously, Yas is a very big name for a long time. At this point, I believe Fabian will do whatever he needs to do to make that team win. I mean, he looked better than they should have in Manchester, to be honest.
Yeah, that truly feels like one of the greatest feats in this game. Like Fabian coming onto that team, bringing them from pretty much the obscurity to winning their region, and then beating BDS at the major, making I guess top 11, making it to the very final round of Swiss. Like that is just something nobody could have seen coming.
Well, and they lose final round of Swiss to Beast Coast, right? So that's
who win the event. Yeah,
even their losses are looking good. I mean, that team just shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't be possible to be that bad to that good. and I picking up more talented player, at least on paper, more talented players, I suppose.
Yeah.
I just think they're, although I do think they're gonna have the issue with it's Siege, right? So once you do well once, everyone pays attention, and it gets harder.
Yeah, I
So
had somebody. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
no, you're fine. I was just gonna say, we might not see progress from them right away, but it depends how different they look in the next stage.
Yeah, I had somebody comment on one of my recent videos asking about if they did so well at the major, why did they make this change? And it could be for a variety of reasons, but my thinking was sort of that they saw that they did really well and that they had a lot of potential, but they needed to improve. Like either they thought some of the players on the team were lacking, or it just didn't fit with the identity they were going for. It could honestly be a million things, but they wanted to get ahead of things is ultimately my thinking. Fabian said that I don't really know anything about Rheumatic either, but he said that he's a really big fragger, and he saw the team as sort of lacking firepower to an extent. Maybe Yas will also help with that. He's a pretty prolific fragger. But yeah, I think they're just getting ahead of things. Like maybe they thought that their performance at the major was a little bit of a fluke, that because people weren't expecting them to be strong, like that really helped them. Maybe they weren't studied as much as the other teams, stuff like that. So that's sort of my thinking. They wanted to get ahead of things before they fell behind, before people really took notice. And I'm really excited for the changes. Like Yas, I think a lot of people call him a bit of a farmer because, well, I mean, obviously Korea's been a weak region for the entirety of the game, basically. And he has like some of the absolute best stats in the game. But again, he plays in one region and Shaiko plays in another region and whatever. But I'm excited for the changes. I think if Fabian is still the mastermind behind it, I think so. JLT is being replaced. I don't know if it shows it on here. I think it's Roy Boy is the other one, right? Being replaced. Do you know?
That's a good question.
Somebody was telling me that it's supposed to be Roy Boy, and my understanding was that Fabian would primarily communicate with him because he had the best English, and then he would communicate to the rest of the team. So I don't know if that throws a wrench in things. Like I don't know if Rheumatic or Yas, either of them has really good English. But that's a little bit of a concern for me if not.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to have, and especially I don't know how they did timeouts with the essential delay between Fabian and the rest of the team.
Yeah, he must have just been only able to convey, like half as much information. And I guess part of the time could, if Roy Boy would explain to the rest of the team, it could bleed over into the beginning of the next round. But, it definitely cuts down on that time you have, and you only have 45 seconds to start with for attack timeout, so that must have been tough.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the biggest thing you have to say is they need an English-speaking player, right? So I assume somebody is staying that knows
English
competently.
So we'll see what they do going forward. I think an exciting one to watch. I'll be disappointed for sure if they don't make the next major. So Jax going over from ENTS to Fear X. This is kind of cool. I guess he speaks either fluent or at least really good Korean, and so he's able to go and play on Fear X. So we'll see if he can have a little bit of a similar effect where I guess Fabian wasn't on the actual playing roster, but Jax comes over from Europe, and maybe he'll help elevate the region a little bit. I think Fear X can probably use a little bit of help, although they are the G2 Slayers. Do you have any sort of opinion on this pickup?
Honestly, I think I'm gonna blow smoke up his butt a little bit, but I think this is the result of what Fabian is doing at Talon. I think people are willing to look at Korea as a region that can compete now, and they're saying, well, maybe if I can get in here, maybe if I can, be a part of something as it grows. Because I think the whole region's going to become better over the next year, right?
I mean, they have to, like, at least a little bit.
Just bleeding off of scrims and whatnot, I think it's going to be interesting. And I think you could see more players like Jax moving over. Maybe not the top echelon of other regions, but, I don't know. You could see players like, I don't want to say it maybe, but like you could see a player like Dream maybe make his way over. Yeah.
Also there's I can't remember which region it is they're now playing in, but you have Blur and Sloth playing on an APAC team. Maybe that's on here. Maybe you'll see it in a little bit. Do you know what I'm talking about? I think it's called Mir, MIR, Mir Gaming or something like that.
Yeah, MIR Gaming.
MIR, yeah.
Mir?
I think it's Mir because it's not all capitalized, right? It's like lowercase IR.
Yeah.
So that's another, yeah, another case of EU players going over to in APAC, even though that's a outdated term, team. And I actually realized that we went to go look at Europe, and then I forgot what we were going to look at Europe for. Because we were talking about earlier the
Maybe finding a home for Kanto.
Yeah,
that's what I was
exactly,
thinking about, at least.
Exactly. Where do I gotta go here? There's probably more direct ways of getting here, but here we go. European League. Anyways, so we were sort of talking about which teams aren't like actual good teams, or contenders or whatever you want to say. But and so we talked about these top four, and then I think we got sidetracked on Virtus Pro. So there's Wolves, which
I believe are all French speaking, right?
They're all French speaking, and actually it looks like they're making some changes this stage. That's another one that we'll maybe see. Although I don't think these changes are official. They allowed Bibu and Shinka to explore other options, and then they are playing in Esports World Cup qualifiers with two other players. I want to say Lasmo and another player, but I think they're also French. But those are big changes. Bibu and Shinka have been on this roster forever. And I think also they were playing in the quals, but they didn't make it. They were on the same team as Hungary. It was those two, Hungary, and I don't remember who the other two names were. But they eventually lost to BDS. Although I don't know if that's the game that eliminated them or not. Anyways, Wolves have been they've been, I guess, not a contender, but they've been a team that you at least have to worry about at the majors if you're playing them early on. They haven't made too many deep runs, but they usually make decent runs, I guess. And then, go ahead.
I was going to say Wolves are interesting because they either seem to show up and be the best team on the day or the worst team on the day. They never seem to be just kind of okay, I guess.
Yeah,
either look really, really good or really, really bad.
And that's also an unfortunate way to be, because I think if you were going to be largely inconsistent, you want to have either a terrible event or a great event, because that means you might win an event. If you have throughout every event some good days and some bad days, that means you're never going to win an event.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? It's so an unfortunate way to be inconsistent. But if you do zoom out, until really, really recently, they were so consistent. They had, I think, the longest streak of any team of making every event, because they've made every event since, gosh, I don't remember which one it is. Charlotte,
it's
or
been
the
a long
one before
time.
that. I think it's Charlotte, yeah. So over 2 years. So yeah, they hadn't missed out on anything for a really long time. But anyways, and then I guess, Fnatic, I guess they're kind of questionable. In my mind, they're still sort of a good team because I don't know, they won a major as Rogue, but that was a while ago now, and they haven't really done too much since then. So maybe I should stop thinking of them that way.
Yeah, there's hope for Fnatic. I think a couple. You've got veterans on there like Leon. I guess Dapex has been along for a long time. They've got good players and also the support of a really, really storied org in Fnatic. So I'd like to think that they'll do something in the future, but I'm not sure what we'll see right around the corner.
Yeah, I'm unwilling to count them out. I had them as not like a top team last stage, but when I did predictions, I put them as like a dark horse team, like a team I could have seen making the major and then maybe even making a decent run. And I think I'll probably, we'll see what all the orgs, all the teams look like come next stage. But I still think that of them to an extent. Like I think there's a good amount of talent on this roster, and some that's not been fully actualized. Looking particularly at Jags and maybe Tyrant. So yeah, I still have maybe not super high hopes, but I have some hopes for this team still.
Yeah, I think they could do good things. I think it's really going to come down to whether Fnatic picked up the team because they didn't have to pay them much, or because they thought the team could win and they're willing to dump money into it, maybe pick up a better player if they need it down the line, right?
Yeah, and then finally, I guess we have Ents, and they made a couple of roster changes. So again, Jack's not on the roster anymore, and neither is Frenchie, but they had this weird 6-man roster going on before. So yeah, they're not like a top team. They still have to establish themselves a little bit more, but they showed some glimmers in beating BDS. I guess they were like the only team to do that during the EUL stage. And so coming back to the topic of you know, which teams are like really good teams and which teams aren't so much. Like,
yeah,
I think these six are all pretty. I don't know. I mean, I get, you know, obviously he's not going back to Wild. He just left Wild.
Yeah,
he's probably not going to Ents because they speak French, and then
the language barriers really do throw an extra wrench in the works, don't they?
Yeah,
because you're just gonna have some rosters that don't move very much.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Although you know there are only 9 teams here. You know, perhaps if we see a 10th team added to the league, who knows what'll happen. Anyways, okay. So now we can probably get back on track. How far back do I have to go?
If I was gonna stick a new team in Pro League, I'd put Kanto on my team just to see what happens, right?
Oh, fair enough. I mean, it's got to be one of the best players just like laying around. I haven't been really a Kanto believer in a long time, and maybe even. I might have even been a Kanto doubter up until the point he won the Berlin Major, and that, so maybe I was made to look foolish there. I don't think I had too much of a strong opinion. I feel like the way my opinion was after that, I just never saw too much from him. Although one of his stages, I think it was when he was on ITB, 1 or 2 stages ago, he was pretty good. He had a really good stage.
Yeah, he's one of those players I can't tell if he's gonna bounce back or if he just had a couple good moments. I hope
very unclear. At one point, he was probably the best player in the world back around SI 2019 or whatever. So it's unfortunate to watch players play because it's the what's the Batman quote or whatever, or is it a Two-Face quote or whatever? Like, live long enough to see yourself become the villain, but it's like live long enough to see yourself be bad or whatever, you know?
Yeah, see yourself become mid.
Yeah. It's like you got to retire. It feels so bad to retire when you're on top, but if you don't retire when you're on top, eventually you're gonna have to fall. So,
I mean, maybe Kanto is one of the players that end up in another region. Who knows?
Oh, it could be. I don't know. We have the Beast Coast becoming Cloud9 Beast Coast. I don't know if that's like a temporary thing or if this is how it is going forward. I guess that's kind of cool. Not something that you see too often, although I think there's a little bit, we've seen a little bit in other games. And then now we have JLT going over to D+. So I don't know if D+ is just taking the leftovers. Damali and Sayora departing. I think these are things that you sort of saw coming. They weren't very impressive on the team. We'll see if D+ ever can return to its former glory, although I don't have super high hopes. We have, Virtue. That's a big one to talk about. I feel like I see maybe more than any other player. Like, I see people talk about how much they love Virtue.
He went to Secret, right?
He's on, he's going to Secret for Miracle.
I like Virtue. I think he's definitely been consistent for a very long time. I think he'll be good for that team. Yeah,
that's another one that, well, I guess a little bit different from Kanto, but I think people were maybe wondering if he was going to retire. I think it's a pretty good look going to Secret. Like, if he'd gone to Wild or something, like maybe there'd be a bit more questions, but Secret was pretty solid, and Miracle not a bad player by any means, but for some reason in my mind, I just feel like Virtue might fit the team a little bit better. Maybe he's more what they need, but I think that's just in sort of a intangible way, so not something I can really put my finger on. I think it's just sort of cool. He had that play a long time ago, and he was still on, maybe it was early days on G2 or whatever, but he like shot a dude's toe to disable the diffuser on Theme Park. Yeah, and that's like one of the greatest Siege plays I think of all time. It was like round 15 against BDS or something really big. So yeah, I'll be excited to see what he does next, because again, if he'd gone to like some lower tier team, it might have just been sad to see him go out sad. But now maybe he has, I won't say greater heights because he's already won an SI. He can't really do anything greater than that, but maybe he can return to similar heights. Hates and Hornetav departing, Keed Stars, E1 dropping Mr. 6 Outlaws, the actual team or just the SC Academy team, yeah. Titan leaving G2, and it doesn't say it here. Oh, it says it up here. Yeah, going over to Bliss. How do you like this one?
I like that. I think Titan's one of those guys that, like, you know, if you've been around the scene, you've heard his name from people that have worked with him. Fabian speaks very highly of him. People who have worked with him speak very highly of him. I think Bliss is a really good team that just haven't quite reached. Maybe I'm not sure if I want to say their potential because I don't know what their potential is.
Yeah,
they've got to be one of the. They show up. They play well.
They've got to be one of the best teams ever for like dudes that have day jobs.
I mean, yeah, 100%. I think they could. I think they could do something really special with that team, and I think Titan's a great addition to maybe push them a little bit farther over the edge.
Yeah, they seem very close. Like they had a pretty good run in SI. You know, they made top 8. They made top 11 in Manchester, just losing in the final round of Swiss, and they were even up. They were up 2-0, so they lost. Well, they got 2-0'd 3 times in a row, which is pretty tough. But you know, 2 pretty solid performances back to back, and now with a really, well, I don't want to say necessarily great coach because we'll see what Titan does. Has he officially been? He was the coach of like Seeker, right? But he was the analyst of G2. I'm just like mincing words here because an analyst, not all the time, but I think on the like top teams, an analyst is basically just another coach. Like it's just a different terminology they use, more or less. I think yeah, a lot of potential there. Like maybe this is just the final push that they need. I think some people were probably thinking that they needed a little bit of roster change, and some people were speculating or hoping or whatever that maybe Virtue would return to Australia, play for Bliss, and that would be what they needed. I thought that could have been cool if it did end up happening, but I think that would have been also awesome. Pretty cool. Yeah, that would have been cool unless again he went out sad, then would have been sad. But I think this change does have a lot of potential. I like the cross-pollination that Europe is providing to the rest of the world at the moment. I think it could be cool. But let's not skip over these ones here because these are some big ones. Wizard being dropped from NIP. He's going over to Los, but I think we'll see Los again in a minute, so we'll talk about that. Iconic being dropped from SSG. Any feelings about that one?
Well, because he wasn't exactly dropped, right? He's dealing with medical issues that we've seen him post about. He says he will return to the scene after surgery and after rehab. So,
right, but I think he is officially dropped from SSG though.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not saying they dropped him because he's like quote unquote like a bad player now. I just think he's unable to compete on his own, and it was probably a mutual kind of thing. Like, guys, I can't play, and you know, like we need people who can play. So I think I'm sure they'll find someone good. I'm sure they'll find someone talented to replace him. Obviously, he's a hard guy to replace, especially with.
Well, they have you don't know this one? This one's huge. You don't know this one?
I have a terrible memory.
They got Benjamaster.
Oh yeah, I did hear about this. You're right.
Yeah. That's like my favorite change, and partially because SSG is one of my favorite teams. But I think that's just that's a super cool change. Yeah, they did for sure. Benjamaster been pretty inconsistent as of late, but before he joined G2, and then also his first thing on G2, which is SI 2023, which they won. He was so insanely consistent. He had like one bad event, and it wasn't even like a whole event. It was like one SI qual or something. Besides that, just by the numbers, he was one of the most consistent players. I want to say of like all time. He had a whole year of being on, maybe even more than a year, of being on like Heroic, and then finally culminating in being on G2, where his numbers were just insane. Him and up there with like Shaiko, uses Solotov, just monstrously good and consistent. That's such a rare combination. So many players are just crazy good, but they have a bad stage here or there because that's just the nature of the beast. But yeah, I'll be really interested to see what he has to offer on SSG, because I don't think the new SSG roster has been necessarily known for their consistency. They have the crank play style. They get a bit crazy, which I think lends itself to inconsistencies, but we'll see how he slots in. I'm really excited to see that. How about you?
I mean, yeah, Super put this really, really well. We've seen the peak of Benjamaster, and it was the best player in the world. So assuming you can put him in a situation where he can reach that peak again, which I think SSG is a great place to do it. They've got talented people on SSG. Obviously, like you said, the whole crank is a bit fun to watch as a spectator, maybe hard to watch as a fan. It's very, very good, or it's, they're very momentum based.
Yeah.
If they're hot, they are hot. But yeah, I could see them doing extremely well with Benja on the team. I could see them having a very, very rough stage. I'm not sure how the first stage in NAL is going to go. I think that's going to tell us the whole story.
luckily, I mean, they have him on now, so they're going to play Esports World Cup qualifiers with him. They're going to play Element 3 with him, and then they get to play NAL. So he's not slotting in immediately to NAL. You know, he gets it's not full T1 competition, unless they make it to Esports World Cup itself, I guess. But you know, he gets a lot of playtime, actual game day reps with the team, which I think could be big.
That's what I mean, right? By the time they get to NAL, people are going to have footage on them, and he's going to have time on the team, and that's when we're really going to see whether the team can compete with, you know, other teams being able to VOD review them and, you know, doing well, and they've been cohesive for a little bit. I think that'll be the big tell. I think we'll know before Montreal whether they work or not.
Yeah, and I think, you know, Benjamin Master, Janano, and Ashen on paper, like looking at those names, that's one of the scariest trios this game has to offer, I would say. You know, there's some other really scary looking rosters, but that's just a real powerful triangle to have assembled.
I mean, that's an entire team that you don't want to be in a clutch situation against, right? It doesn't really matter who it is.
Yeah, they got well, Forrest's been a little bit inconsistent, but Fultz, even on his sort of newfound roles, he was really good in Manchester. So just a really frightening team across the board. And again, one I'm really excited to watch. And Iconic, yeah. So I wanted to talk about the whole injury thing. So do you know about, so SBL is like a, I don't even know what to call it. Yeah, it's management. Okay. And they represent, I think at this point, like quite a few players. And I've even heard players say it's, if you don't have them, you're basically handicapping yourself because they're like so much better than what it's so much better than everyone else at doing that sort of thing. The whole wrist injury thing, they put a really good spin on it. And so I want to choose my words a little bit carefully here, because I'm not trying to say they like lied about it or whatever, but I'm just saying that they presented it in a really good way that people immediately went from Iconic is so terrible and washed to, oh yeah, that makes sense that he did bad. He had an injury. He'll be back. He's a great player. You know, like do you get what I'm saying? Like I'm not trying to say they abused the fact or whatever. I'm just saying they used it. They spun it really well.
I mean, yeah, I'll be honest.
Really well.
They spun it well to me, right? Because I look at it and I see someone who was so good for so long, and then all of a sudden just kind of his career nosedive kind of quick. You know what I mean? And to me, that lines up really well with an injury of that kind, because I've had friends at my age with arthritis, and it developed really, really quick for him. I know it's not exactly arthritis he's dealing with, but things like wrist and knee and joint injuries, right? They develop very, very quickly, or at least they get worse very, very quickly. So that rings true to me as someone who's dealt with that kind of thing. And I don't know. I just see him coming back and being good again, assuming he can come back 100%.
Yeah, I definitely want him to come back big. Like, I hope whatever treatment they have to offer is sufficient in getting him figured out. And we'll have to see what sort of a team he can land on, what openings will be open at the time. Like that will honestly be probably pretty massive. I think a lot of teams will be willing to take a chance on him if they are at all considering picking up a player. But again, if NA is doing really, really well, I don't know if the top teams will be willing to make a change. We'll have to see. But I do wonder a little bit how long this has been going on, or supposedly going on, because he was obviously terrible this last stage on SSG. But even before that, he was pretty bad on M80. I don't think he was like awful. It was like kind of bad. The whole team was pretty bad for the like last while. M80
I just don't think that M80 roster works, to be honest.
They didn't. I mean, they were good.
Individual thing.
They were good in NA, and then they just could not do anything internationally. It was weird. But I do want see what I'm saying is that did he? And again, I'm not an expert. I don't know. Like you're saying they come on pretty quickly, but like, do you think this was going on all during M80 and that was the cause? Like, because I almost feel like they're, again, I'm not trying to throw any shade, but maybe they're using it as a little bit of an excuse for that performance.
I mean, yeah, a good management team's going to do that, right? They're going to try to spin that the best they can. I just, like we said, I don't think that M80 team works regardless. Yeah. And I think if that issue started to come up as he joined M80, right, and it only got worse, and then he comes back to SSG and we say like, oh, this is going to be great, and then all of a sudden he looks terrible, like, maybe we can say he was it was starting to be a problem on M80, but I think the team culture on that one, or just something didn't work there. Something wasn't right. I don't know if it was just conflicting ideals or players that didn't mesh. Something just didn't work on that team. But no, I'd honestly, I'd like to put it down to an injury for Iconic. Especially how badly he played for SSG, because that was just a fall off like that is spectacular.
Yeah, because it's not like he was just some mediocre player throughout his career and then he was really bad. He was one of the better players in NA for quite a while. Like pretty much his entire time on Astralis and probably even before that. Just a really good player. So yeah, I wasn't trying to like throw any accusations. I wasn't trying to posit anything because I don't really have a lot of information on the situation beyond what anyone else does. I was just curious what your thoughts might have been about that. So yeah, nobody in the comments think I'm talking shit about Iconic. I think
his biggest
as
problem
far
is
as I know,
be
which is not much.
Finding a team that fits his play style.
Yeah,
when he comes back.
Because again, like you have to assume he probably teams just don't pick up players they already drop. Like so he won't go back to SSG. He won't go back to M80 more than likely. So that's really limiting you.
I can't see him on Dark Zero.
Yeah,
I can't see him on Sonics. I don't see why Beast Coast would make a change right now.
He's also been on Sonics before. But
True.
if you ignore that, I almost think maybe he could go to Sonic because they've really changed their identity lately. They just had a lot of roster changes. So in however many months that it takes for him to get figured out, like maybe, but we'll
I don't think Iconic works on that team because Iconic is kind of the guy that you build a play style around, at least to a certain extent. And I think Super's, I follow the Sonics very closely because I am a big fan. Mm-hmm. Super has been very insistent that they are going back to the way Super wants to play the game. And I just don't think that aligns with, obviously it didn't align the first time he teamed with Iconic. I don't think it would align now. So I can't see that roster working out, especially because who do you replace on the Sonics to pick up Iconic, right?
Yeah, I don't even know what the roster is going to be going. Like, are they sticking with the Grixer change? Is Geo not on the roster anymore? I don't even know what their roster is.
As far as I'm aware, Geo is still officially bent, so it'll be Grixer, Rexen, Adam, Merc, and Ambi.
Right. So yeah, again, I don't know, but what I'm saying is, do you have any idea how long? So you were talking about you might have a little bit of experience with this sort of thing. Do you have any idea how long it takes to correct this sort of thing, the injury?
So I believe it was explained. It's just a surgery to correct it. I think the problem will be how long it takes to rehab and come back.
Right. That's more so what I mean.
Yeah, because I honestly I can't say, right, because I came from like sports where this is an issue. In sport, like you play football and you wrestle and stuff. The rehab's kind of different because you just don't wrestle, right? You just don't go to football practice, right? When you have a bad wrist.
Right.
I don't know how you rehab for seizure, right? Because you're gonna go back to doing the exact same thing that messed it up in the first place. Especially if he stays a wrist aimer, which I assume he is because he's got wrist issues. Maybe he adopts a new aiming style. Maybe he adopts a new lower sense and he plays arm. I don't know. But yeah, I don't think we'll see him back for NAL.
No, yeah, that seems kind of early. And that's what I'm saying. Like, if it's not NAL, then that'll mean it's however many months later. And so maybe the Sonics or any other team will have changed by that time. Some players will have struggled. It'll be easier to say like this player will be that sort of thing. But it's super speculative. Yeah.
Well, especially if there's a 10th team later on, maybe. We're still in a 9-team league, right?
Oh, and then and there's also like I don't know, Luminosity. I don't even know what they're doing because there's at least one roster pickup for them that I'm not aware of because they lost Hat over to auction, which we'll get to in just a minute. So they have at least one open slot, but again, things could have changed. Things could change drastically in the however many months are to follow for Iconic. Benjamaster to SSG is probably up here, but we've talked about it. Blaz and Loira picked up by G2. This is probably one of the most talked about changes in the off season. Any speculation on this one?
Obviously Blaz has had really, really good stages. And I think Blaz is a fantastic player. I think what role does Blaz even play though? That's what
bait.
I can never.
I don't actually know.
It's fair.
No, I don't.
Because I don't know where he fits in on the team. Roles are so much harder to understand these days because it seems like everyone does everything. But
it really is.
because I always thought of Blaz as like an entry, but I don't think you pick up
someone
to play entry with Doki.
Yeah, I don't know who. I don't really know what Loira does at all. But so they dropped Benjamaster and they dropped Virtue. So it's like they basically dropped an entry, or at least one of the more frontline players, and they dropped one of the more backline players. So I would assume Blaz is going to be more of a frontline player and Loira is going to be more of a backline player. But I don't know. Roles are very weird these days.
Yeah, no, I think Blaz could do fantastic things on G2. I think they needed a change in some way. I'm not sure if this is the change I would have made, but I think they needed something. They just haven't looked. I mean, the last term was terrible for them.
Yeah,
I don't know anything about Loira. I assume maybe Alamal would know Loira a little bit better, both being Brazilian. I don't know.
And their coach is also Brazilian, so G2 gets more Brazilian by the month, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it's not a bad strategy, right? It's the best region in the world.
Yeah.
I guess you could say NA is right now, but...
I mean, on a technicality, but I think I'm still giving it to Brazil. Like, if you zoom
Brazil
out...
had a bad stage. But...
Yeah, because it was literally all grand finalists were Brazilian for a year, so I just feel like I'm not ready to move on from them being the best region just yet. I got to see at least one more event of non-Brazilian dominance.
Yeah, so I don't see a reason you wouldn't go towards a Brazilian playstyle, and obviously a Brazilian player would be better at that. I think Blaz plays that really nice. I just think he's good. I don't know a better way to put it. I think he's a good player. I think that roster will look interesting, but
yeah,
I don't know. They always have potential, right? Like, you look at Doki, you look at Alamau, you look... Who's am I missing?
Uno.
Oh.
Well, yeah.
So you look at Doki and you look at Alamau.
Yeah, it's still two world champions
there.
Yeah, there's still two fantastic players. I think most people that know what they're talking about are going to have Doki and Alamau still as two of the very best players in the game. I think that's pretty reasonable. And
I just think it's tough to replace Benja.
It really is, and same thing with Virtue. And they were both world champions. You know, once you win a title, it you have to do quite a lot to fully sully your reputation. They're both two phenomenal players, and so we'll see. But clearly they needed some sort of a change. Maybe that didn't even necessarily have to be a player change, but that's the easiest way. You know, if you want to shift the attitude or culture of your team, that's really hard to do without changing the actual people on your team to an extent. So I'll be looking forward to that one. They did make it through Esports World Cup qualifiers in the upper bracket. They didn't take a loss. Again, they probably played mostly T2, T3, whatever teams. But, you know, half of the teams that made it through, including BDS, they took at least one loss, and G2 didn't. So that's something. So they didn't get absolutely mopped or something. They didn't get upset already. So we'll see what happens. Frenchie going from ENTS over to GK. So another EU to another region import. And this is, it's not quite a trade because Frenchie came from ENTS and Blaz went to G2, but it's a European player going to GK and a European player leaving GK to go back to Europe. So almost kind of a trade, but GK is just they just be picking up players. They've had Blaz, they've had Noodle, they have had Neskin, they've got Frenchie. Like they be doing stuff all the time.
Yeah, GK, when I first saw them at the Atlanta major, I thought, man, like, wow, do we have a new region in Siege all of a sudden? And then they kind of went, we didn't.
Yeah,
I don't know.
They looked pretty silly at SI after that. Yeah,
they're willing to try things. I think that's cool. Yeah. But I don't think their roster has gotten better, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they dropped Blaz. Like, obviously he got an offer from G2, and so he left them. So it's not like they had much of a choice. So we'll have to see. I don't have like super high expectations. The Atlanta thing feels like a bit of a fluke, but there was also a moment at Copenhagen where Falcons, they looked pretty good in the play-ins, but then they went like 0-3 in Swiss or whatever, so that died off a little bit. But so we've had some exciting moments for Middle East, North Africa beyond just GK. You know, a moment with Falcons, maybe a moment or two with GK. So I don't know. I could see them making an okay run, relatively speaking, at a major, but I'm not super jazzed about the roster or anything.
Yeah, we'll just have to see what they do with it. It's the only thing you can really say about it.
Yeah, so Hat going from Luminosity to Oxygen. Do you like Hat? Do you not like Hat?
I
as a
think Hat's a
player?
good player. I don't follow him like on a social basis,
Yeah, I just mean as a player.
but yeah, no, I think Hat's good. I think Hat's one of those players that if you put him in a really good system, he might turn out to be a really, really good player. It's kind of hard when when you start off on a team like Luminosity or Mirage or any of the lower tier teams. It's kind of hard to develop.
Yeah.
I would say as a newer player to the league, I think Hat showed he had really good potential. Uh, I'm not sure if I'm not sure if I still think OXG is the team to I don't know, develop new talent. I guess I want to say OXG have just looked lost for a while. Like
Yeah,
they've always had talent, but they just don't seem to have a direction.
I had pretty high hopes for them coming into this last stage, and they were seemingly living up to them. They were, a really good team throughout best of ones, and then they made it to the playoffs to actually qualify for the major, and they just fell short. They had like 2 or 3 games where if they won, they made it, and they just couldn't get it done, which is a little bit sad. They have really experienced players at this point. Gomez, Diaz, Yaga, even newer. They're all pretty tenured players. They've all been playing for 2+ years. Maybe they seem like younger players depending on how long you've been watching, but like they are pretty much veterans at this point. Maybe not super veterans like some of the players we have, but they are quite experienced players. So they don't lack experience. They've all had pretty good moments here or there, on various teams, except formerly on Oxygen because Yaga left the team, came back. They've all had good moments. They've proven themselves, but yeah, I don't know. I just think it's a really bad look what happened to them last stage, where they were excellent in best of ones, and then they just could not get the job done in best of threes. Almost similar to Mr. B's Beast Coast, where they were pretty good, and then they had multiple chances to qualify for the major, and they couldn't do it. Maybe even similar to Wild Card, not this last stage, but I think the one before that, when they had Merc and Spirits and Adam and whatever, and they were really good in best of ones, and then they couldn't get the job done to qualify, etc., etc. But all this to say that Oxygen, I don't know. I'm not counting them out just yet. I think they're a pretty solid team. Obviously, as you said earlier, you're a pretty big Dream fan, so Hat is replacing Dream. That's got to hurt a little bit, but I'm sort of rambling at this point. I think they have potential. I could see them making a major. I could see them making a run at a major.
Yeah, obviously I'm a little biased because I want to see Dream succeed. He hasn't had the best. He hasn't been exactly a star. I just think I might have looked more towards maybe a coach or a leadership change rather than moving around with players.
Yeah.
So I think they've had a lot of very, very good players on the team for a very long time. I don't think anyone's ever joined Oxygen and I thought, oh, they're not good. Right? Who do you have, right? Maybe you could say Fish wasn't the most amazing player in the world. Maybe Sweater was something. But I don't know. I feel like you look at and maybe they'll do it, right? Maybe a theory change, maybe a different approach to the game. But I just think they've had too much talent without... I don't know. I think their problem's always been in NA, right? Because they do well internationally when they get there, but they don't always get there, at least as of late.
Yeah, it's been a while since they've been there. They missed the last 4 events, I think, at least. This major and then all 3 events last year. So yeah, it's been a bit of a struggle.
Yeah.
I think
last thing they were at was SI 23. So
yeah, I think they also added to their staff another coach or analyst or maybe even something. They added alongside Hopes and Redeemer. I don't remember who it was, but I think that they did. So that might help as well. They had the player change, but they also had the staff change. So Hat played on Mr. B's Beast Coast, and they were good the first stage, and then the next stage they had dropped Hyper and Vertical, and then they weren't so good. They were pretty bad. And then he goes over to Luminosity, and he really wasn't very good this last stage. I think he was maybe okay, but there were certainly other players on that team that were more of the star players, as it turned out. And I think some people are still pretty high on Hat after his rookie stage, so we'll see what he does on one of the more top teams. I guess Oxygen, now sort of falling out of the favor, being a little bit less of a top team, but I think I'd still maybe put him there if I was going to be drawing lines. So we'll have to see. I have decently high expectations for this. One thing that I do find really interesting, Dream, obviously a hard support player. Hat, I think he's capable, like he doesn't have to be on entry necessarily. I think he was playing a little bit of weird roles on Luminosity. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But obviously not a hard support player like Dream, so that seems like a strange move, but it also seems like the kind of move that a lot of teams are making in this current meta. How do you feel about that?
I personally, I think a lot of teams have. I feel like every team goes through an iteration where they try to get rid of the hard support and put someone maybe more flexible in that role, and I just don't feel like it works very well. I think we've seen, obviously, the more support or the more firepower you have on your support role, the better. But I just think you have to have. I think you have to have a player who's willing to do all the grunt work. The player who's willing to, go negative every game. Players willing to die planting the bomb, even if we don't plant as much as we used to in Pro League. But I think you need that dedicated, true support player, with the exception of maybe. I feel like every team that's really been successful consistently has had that foundational support player behind them.
Yeah,
I just don't think it works without them.
If we look at successful or at least strong teams recently, like BDS, they didn't win the major, but they were really close, and they have Bride, who is a very competent fragger, but he's known first and foremost as an amazing support player, like willing to get down the bomb, willing to clutch and whatnot. And so yeah, they have him. W7M has Nade. G2, when they won SI, they had Blur, and I think maybe some people feel differently about Blur, but
I think Blur
but still, yeah. Yeah, Blur won SI, and now he's playing on Mirror Gaming. But they've all had that player, but they do have a pretty support-oriented player, I guess, at the very least, in Dias. Like, I think somebody who has and can play the Thermite and whatever other, defensive operator you need.
I do think it's less relevant on defense nowadays than it is on attack. I feel like just on attack, you really need that guy that can, I don't know, just do everything that sucks, I guess, the best way I can put it.
Yeah, and my question is a little bit, like, is Dias willing to do that? Because he has played a lot of supportive roles, but of all the players to have the baiter finger pointed at them, like, he's got to be one of the players that's really up there.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. Even though he's probably one of my favorite NA players for whatever reason, but yeah, I do wonder if he's willing to play support and also always willing to, suffer all of the consequences of that. Yeah.
And it's a hard role to play, right? Because like on paper, you kind of look like you suck.
Yeah.
And I get that.
I was I was a support player.
I've been a support player my whole career.
Yeah, not that I was a pro or whatever, but whenever I would play Siege with my stack, I was the Thermite man.
I love support. I think it's the best thing in the world, but obviously not everyone shares that opinion.
It depends on the team, I think. It depends on how they treat it and how they play and whatever. I think it can suck sometimes, but it can be a lot more interesting. A lot of times you survive a lot longer into the round, which I think in and of itself leads to a lot. It can make things more interesting. Like sometimes if a lot of people on your team die, you get into a man disadvantage. You might have to fill another role in a sense. I think there's a lot of cool dynamics that can emerge from stuff like that. And we're getting, I don't want to say low on time. I'm not technically capped on time, but let's maybe try to speed it up just a little bit. Not to rush or anything, but we have Miracle being dropped from Secret. We talked about this one just a little bit. He goes over to Vivo Keystars though, and that's a team that I don't know a whole ton of, but anytime I would look at their roster, like, oh yeah, it looks like a pretty good team. I could see them maybe squeaking their way into a major. Do you know much about the Keystars?
I really don't, actually.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Has he been officially picked up on here? Will it show me? Yeah. What is their team now? So Daffodil, Lenda, Stemp, Miracle, Mr. Six Outlaw. So this guy doesn't even have a Wikipedia page, so I'm not sure what his deal is. But Miracle, pretty solid. Daffodil, I don't know if you have followed, but he's been really good. Like I've been really impressed with Daffodil. And then Lenda and Stemp, I think, are names that I recognize but don't know as much about.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
these
he could do
guys
cool
had
things.
they had Hates and Hornetau previously, which are
Brazil's just a brutal region, though, right?
it's a brutal region and it's also a really deep region. I think they just have a ton of really good players, and even they have a lot of really good players that are outshined by amazing players. So just can sometimes be a good problem to have. It does suck when you're trying to qualify for majors because you have to go through a lot of good people, but when you need to pick up players for your team, it's great because there are a lot of options.
Yeah, he could do good things there.
I think so as well. I was a little bit disappointed by them last stage, but I still maintain relatively decently high hopes. Here's that Pug Stack team I was talking about: Dexter, Hyper, Benji, Fox A, and Dream. We have Rheumatic, going over to Talon. He was on, what was he on, like Dire Wolves? No, he was on Stratos, Beyond Stratos, and played there for 5 months. Now going over to Talon. So I think one to look out for. I think anytime a name that you do not recognize at all joins a team that you do recognize, that's always something to look out for. Like there must be a good reason for them to make such a pickup.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's usually goes very, very well or very, very bad, but I think it'll go pretty well.
And then we have Blur Sloth going over to Mir, also Wafer as the coach. So a little bit of other regions being injected into. What region are they actually? They're Korean as well. So we now have the likes of Fearex and potentially these guys. Maybe they'll be terrible, but maybe they'll be good. So yeah, these guys, Damwon, Talon. So maybe we'll even have a bit of a competitive South Korea these days. We'll have to see.
Actually, I'm not sure if you got a chance to follow it. I did watch most of Talon's games. The region was surprisingly competitive, especially considering how much. Yeah.
No, I didn't really watch, but good to know. And then, various other Brazilian changes. Benjamaster here again. Nello, going from the playing roster on Wild to head coach. I think he's probably one of the more favorably looked at players in general. Maybe not as much as like Virtue, but I think a lot of people like Nello, so it's probably nice to see him not be fully dropped, still departing the playing roster, but he'll be the head coach. I think a lot of players don't have what it takes to be a coach, but we'll see. Maybe he'll be good at the job.
You never know. We'll see.
Yeah. Alems returning onto Ents. I feel like this is a pretty big one. He got dropped from BDS, not so much because he was doing badly, but because they had some players they really, really wanted to pick up in Uzis and Solotov. How do you feel about this one?
I mean, I just, you kind of said it, right? It's not like he was a bad player. They wanted to make a change. They chose him. I think Alems is still a good player. I think he'll bring something good to Ents. And I think it'll be fun to see where he goes. I like Alems. I think he's cool.
Yeah, he's the kind of player, he's like a feast or famine player to my mind. And so was Renshiro, and maybe that's kind of bad to have on the same team. Kind of guys that I could see drop 3 kills in a game, but I could also see them drop 16 kills in a game. And they did so pretty often. They were sort of inconsistent, but they on certain games they really showed up hard, which can sometimes be a detriment, but can also be a pretty big boon depending on which games they show up in, obviously. Virtue, we talked about Fantasy and Hate. So yeah, Hate's leaving Vivo Keatstars, coming over to Nip, and then Fantasy, he's been toiling around in like T2 and whatnot for a little bit. How do you feel about Fantasy?
Honestly, I don't keep up with Brazil enough. All I know about Fantasy specifically is that Ace of Pirate really likes to say his name, and I'll be happy to see it. I'll be happy to hear it again. So
yeah, unless there's something I'm missing, I don't think there's too much to know since he's left Furia, which I guess was a little while ago. But he was, I guess, another feast or famine player. I feel like maybe I don't want to overuse that term, but certainly he fit the bill where some games he would just absolutely take over, be a complete monster, and some games he looked a bit silly. But yeah, definitely a player that has the potential to go huge. Ninjas in Pajamas finally making some big changes. It seems like maybe they've needed that for a while. So the roster is now these two, Pino, Psycho, and Cons. So we'll see how it plays out. I think it looks like a good roster on paper, but I'm not fully sold. Brazil is just a crazy competitive region.
Yeah, there's no shame in maybe not being the best in Brazil, right?
Yeah. For sure, but I think this is definitely one to watch. Even if you're not like a Ninjas in Pajamas fan, I think Fantasy returning will certainly provide some excitement. And then we see Pack Bull, so he got dropped from Wild. Now he's going over to Revan, so yet another European import into another region this stage, but also another European import specifically for Revan. They've done this quite a few times. The community has berated them a little bit for doing this, and maybe it was for the specific people that they picked up. I think Packbull's pretty well liked. I think Revan is pretty well not liked, so an interesting mix in that regard. I don't have super high hopes. It's not like Revan has really performed. They made one, I don't know, was it Copenhagen or Atlanta? Do you remember?
They would have made Copenhagen, yeah.
Yeah, and then they went, they got crushed. I think they made it out of their group, and then they went 0-3. So nothing spectacular, I guess. Good luck, Packbull. You might need it. We have Dodo, who was on Wild, and now he's, I guess, on the bench. I don't know what all this is. He's on the bench, but he's also on this. Yeah, some weird stuff. Do we have any other big ones to talk about? Mr. B going over to Daystar. Same thing with Jogor. Going over Mr. B as a coach, Jogor as a player. This will be another interesting one to watch. Mr. B, I feel like he was thought of almost as like a coach player in his time, not only in T2, but in T1. Like he was really, really influential on his team. Like he was the IGL, but he also made decisions seemingly beyond that. So maybe he'll slot well into the role as an official coach.
We can definitely see. I think Mr. B has potential to do really big things, but I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not sure if we'll ever see it work out, I guess is what I'm say.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough going over to APAC. Like, obviously, one of the absolute goats of this game, like Fabian, can make it work, but I don't know if just anybody's going to be able to make something like that work.
I hope it works out for him.
Yeah, sure. Arthur and Wizard going over to Los. So Los were, a Brazilian team playing in North America, but they were pretty clearly the worst. They had a bunch of close games, but they still came out on the bottom pretty clearly. They were the only team that wasn't really even competitive in the actual quals, like once we got out of round robin. But I think these are some pretty exciting changes. I think Arthur has showed a lot of promise, and Wizard, I don't know. I think a lot of people have really doubted Wizard. He didn't look spectacular in a lot of his time on NIP, but having spent so much time there, he's certainly picked some things up. He's a fairly high-profile name now. I like the look of the new Los. It's these two, and then I think Legacy, Farias, and Sexy Cake. So I could definitely very easily see them not get last place. I could maybe even see them make the major. I think I'd probably be a little bit surprised, but what do you think about it?
I mean, I think Los can only go up, right? I mean,
there's
truly tragic.
But yeah.
So I don't think you can make a bad change on Los right now. I think I don't know a ton about Arthur, but I mean, if you say he's shown promise, I believe you. And I don't know. I think Los can do good things. I think NA is a region that's maybe more open than it appears. Like there's really good top teams, but there's always weird stuff that happens during the stage.
For sure.
I think they could do something interesting, at the very least.
I could see it for sure. What else do we have? Toski dropped from Cruelty. It's kind of whatever, but they were a team at the major. And I think that actually does it. I guess we've reached the end here, and I don't see any other really notable ones to talk about. I feel like there's a handful of ones that are like semi-confirmed. I don't really want to go through the whole rumor page, that are like semi-confirmed but haven't been announced by the org, so they're not actually on here. But I think we've talked about enough. Do you have any final things you want to talk about, or any closing remarks?
Honestly, I think coming into it, the Esports World Cup is going to be kind of wild, if I'm honest. I think it's going to be one of those events where a team you don't expect shows up. That's usually how it goes, right? But I think going into the actual next stages of Siege will be far more interesting than what we get. I think Esports World Cup will be entertaining, but I think we're actually going to have a really close stage 2. Just because historically, right, stage 1 has always been kind of weird. A lot of teams coming back from SI, especially only on a couple weeks. There's a lot of teams that historically just don't do well in that first stage. I think Stage 2 is going to be very, very interesting. I think BDS will still look great. I think Beast Coast is going to struggle a little bit, especially losing Fett. I think that's going to be a tough one for them.
Losing Fett and having the biggest target on their back in the world.
Yeah, I think that's going to be... I think NA is going to be blown wide open. Obviously, I'm a big fan, so I'm a little biased, but I think the Sonics are going to do really well Stage 2. I'm not sure how well Oxygen will do. That'll be interesting. Obviously, Korea's growing as a region, so I think that's going to be very interesting to watch. And we might even see them get, the next time they revise the rules, we might even see Korea get an extra major spot, so that'll be fun. Europe will be interesting. Obviously, Brazil is just going to be a dogfight to the death, and whoever comes out will probably be in the grand final at Montreal. But no, I think there's a lot of good Siege on the way right now. I wish we could work on the schedule a little bit, maybe get back to 3 majors, but
yeah,
for what we have now,
tune it up so the off season isn't so long. Two last things that just came to mind. How do you think BDS is going to do at the World Cup? Because it was Gamers 8 before, but they're technically the 2-time reigning champions of basically this event. You think honestly, they have the three-peat in them?
I wouldn't be surprised if they won it, just because there's nothing quite like coming in second place to motivate a really good team.
Yeah.
Especially, I'm not sure how many teams could really shut down Shaiko as effectively as Beast Coast did. Because Shaiko did not have a bad
that was
major.
insane.
He just had a bad grand final.
I don't think I've ever seen Shaiko just look that bad. Like, every round, I'm like, I saw Shaiko coming, like, all right, he's dead. Like, it was something I never thought I'd see the day.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of teams will be able to do that to Shaiko. I think Lickafac's a monster. Breeday's always been there. Saltov and Usis have been a great addition to the team. I don't think it's out of the ballpark to say BDS is a favorite going into the World Cup. Yeah, I could very easily see them winning that.
And then finally, what do you think about Furia in the future? Do you think they're going to make the comeback? You know, relatively speaking, do you think they're going to start making grand finals again, or do you think they've cooled off enough to where they're still a good team but not a great team anymore?
They're absolutely a great team. We're talking about them like they're iffy because they took top 8 in the Worlds, and because that's how good they are. It's not crazy to come, especially coming off of the grand final, right? You get 2 weeks, you go into your stage, then you go to the major. They have had no time off for a very long time. We've seen plenty of teams just struggle with that lack of recovery time. I think the teams they played very well, but losing to Liquid isn't something I would expect to happen to Furia again, if I'm honest. I know interregional stuff is weird, but no, I think Furia is going to come back. I think they're going to look fantastic. They may not win in Montreal, but I think they'll be right up there, at least semifinals. I think they'll look great. Yeah,
I would be surprised if they, don't at least make top 8 next major, but top 4, top 2, top 1, not really out of the question. So yeah, I guess that pretty well does it for us. So I'll link your channel in the description. So I definitely recommend everybody check it out. Do you have one video that you would recommend the most if anybody was dipping their toes into your channel?
On the Siege side of it, it's definitely the video is called Professional Rainbow Six Siege is About to Change. It's about Fabian's introduction to PSG talent, obviously. And if you're interested in the more video essay side, it's kind of a complicated question because the best thing I think I've ever made is my Cyberpunk video, but it's 4.5 hours long. I don't expect anyone to get into something that aggressive, but my Mass Effect 1 video I think is pretty solid. And that was just released a little while ago. Mass Effect 2 is coming up. So either of those, I think you'll decide whether or not you like my channel. Okay, yeah, I'll definitely link the channel down below, and I'll probably try to link the Siege video you mentioned in particular. I assume most people watching this video, that would be the thing most of interest to them as a jumping off point. But definitely check out the other stuff. I've been a big fan of this guy's videos. I think he does a really good job, and I'm excited to see what he does in the future and how his channel grows. And so yeah, I think that's gonna do it for us. I will catch you guys in the next video.